Welcome to another edition of Eusebius on Times Live. We now know who the ANC's top 7 will be for the next 5 years, unless something weird happens. And the question, of course, is what does it all mean? And the point of this edition of the podcast episode is really to try and create meaning. We can reasonably disagree about whether this is, as most media houses have covered it, an outright inadvertently slate-based victory for President Cyril Ramaphosa, whether we should all, regardless of political affiliation, feel excited that the country had not been, quote-unquote, captured again by the RET forces. I see it very differently. I think the media coverage in the aftermath of the announcement of the top 7 is absolutely crazy, but I don't know how my colleagues see it, and I've got two colleagues of mine that I had invited to be part of this conversation, and I'm absolutely delighted that they are with me. Investigative reporter with the Sunday Times, Sabelo Skiti, who is no stranger to the platform and always gives of his time. Sabelo, thanks so much for being part of the conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me, Eusebius.
And then Sam Mkokeli, who is a seasoned journalist, also worked inside the state before, so he understands the internal machinations of government, besides being a seasoned journalist himself, and also with Mkokeli Advisory as well. Sam, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, hi, Eusebius. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
You're listening to Eusebius on Times Live. That's this latest podcast on Times Live. And it's me, Eusebius McKaiser, exploring the major issues of the week. That means you're going to hear a lot of law, politics, and ethics, how they intersect, and how important these stories are in the life of all South Africans.
When people zone,
their children must know these are sellouts.
They put saliva on the paper.
Mr. Julius Malema whispered and said, sing it, sing it.
And then they share that zone.
No, I'm not going to apologize.
Can I have my iPad, please? So they stole it.
I was about to describe you guys as seasoned, but I don't do euphemisms. Old journalists.
Well, government spin doctor, short-lived, but
I'm not old.
Seasoned.
I'm not old. I mean,
when I think of season, I think about salt. On the other hand, you say like someone who's been around for a while. It's like, Aish, why are you aging me?
But you know, in ANC language, right, all of us, our age group, were babies.
Yeah.
We're not seasoned at all. I mean, they still have presidents that are probably approaching.
Yes,
age.
I am.
Actually,
I think there's probably just 2 or 3 years between the three of us. I don't want to know who's the oldest, the youngest. We won't play that game. But the youngest person in the top 7 is our age group.
She's 44.
She's 44?
Yeah.
Okay, she's older than me.
And the median age in South Africa? 7?
That is crazy.
Yeah,
that is absolutely crazy.
It tells you all you need to know. I mean, one of those videos that were shot at the conference, I couldn't help but just look at this one.
Yeah, so we're all young by ANC standards.
No, we're kids, we're toddlers.
The other day I was praising SABC reporter Griselda Lewis, who has the most amazing on-the-ground energy.
Oh, yeah.
And as peers, we're very bad at explicitly, publicly recognizing each other.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing we do, even if it's not malicious. So I thought, let me actually say on Twitter, well done, you're really fantastic. And she responded, which I think was meant to be a well-intentioned response, and says, thank you so much, Eusebius, for recognizing us younger ones. I'm like, how? You can't be that much younger than me. Like, what the hell? So I'm on a mission to find out. If you know, please DM me what year Griselda Lewis was born in. I'm not convinced that the age gap is that much.
No. Look, I'll tell you one thing. She's been in the industry longer than me. So, I mean,
that's what I thought.
If she's the younger ones, then again.
I'm like, us younger ones? Be that as it may, we've now got a top 7. I've got a strong view, but I want to host you guys narrating your viewpoints first. Let me give it a bit of structure for our listeners. I think one thing that's missing, regardless of how you see the top 7 overall, is an historical analysis of each of these characters. Who are they? What have they done? What do we know? What don't we know? If I was a weekend editor, I would put my reporters on assignment to produce that as pieces for Sunday. So that's an important reason why I've asked Sam to be here and Sabelo, because institutional memory is crucial in answering those questions. We're going to come to that later. I want to start with where most of my listeners are at, which is just at the level of sentiment, Sam. This top 7, is it a top 7 that can proverbially renew the ANC and set it up for doing better in the state?
Look, renewal is the propaganda in the ANC, and it's actually getting stale. Because they have not defined the character of the new. And what we're seeing here is the ANC replicating itself, and we can expect that the West of the ANC will materialize. It's the same players. They've been in the ANC, and Cyril Ramaphosa in 1991 was the guy who had a beard and was holding the microphone when Mandela spoke for the first time in Cape Town. Then Paul Mashatile is in his 30s. He's just graduated from student politics and activism around the Transvaal. So none of these people are new. Gwede Mantashe in 1991 wants to be an NEC member at the conference of the ANC in Durban, and is a well-established trade unionist from the 80s. So if you look at the top 3 itself, I know where the bulk of the power in the ANC rests, it's Fikile Mbalula, the guy next door. We know. So ANC is not capable of renewing itself. When it comes to the state, the problem with the state is the state, the machinery itself. So many vacancies, and it's broken beyond a repair. So it's not going to be fixed by the same people who broke it. The ANC has no clue how to undo it. And a simple example, today, the Ministry of Public Service and Administration really is the human resources in government. That ministry is vacant. It's been vacant for 8 months. So whenever the ANC talks about a development state and fixing the state, you know that is just a joke. If you could keep that job vacant for 8 months, it tells you. I mean, the state is the single biggest impediment to our economic development. So the ANC doesn't care about
indictment.
that. The ANC doesn't care about it.
Sabelo, I kept thinking about you in preparation for this conversation, and our other colleagues, both at Arena and across the media, who have done the minutiae of the work that became the bedrock of state capture. And even state capture aside, just in terms of pure technical competence, I think of how excited ANC delegates are when Gwede's name gets mentioned, Fikile's name gets mentioned, Tina's name almost gets mentioned, Nomvula's name gets mentioned. And I think to myself, how? South Africans are addicted to amnesia. This top 7 is not exactly a top 7 that can bat for an ANC that is imploding.
Yeah. Look, I mean, and I was going to go exactly there, Eusebius, because for me, I think the media got caught up, and I hate using the word the media, but, you know, political journalists who were there, I think got caught up in the fervor of the moment. Yes, it was a victory for Cyril, but only as far as ANC terms go. You know, because it had come that close for him to, you know, potentially be removed at this conference. But otherwise, like Sam is intimating here, you know, for South Africans, it changes nothing. In fact, for me, I was going to say, actually, it even puts us in a worse position now, because what it does is that in Cyril's mind, this basically cements whatever that he thinks he's been doing for the last 5 years, you know, which means that we're going to see more of the same. I mean, if you look at just how clumsily the whole ESCOM thing was handled, you can see that the timing of that resignation and everything was built in a way so that ESCOM doesn't become an issue at conference, you know, therefore taking away what ought to be a very real sort of Achilles heel for these guys, and something that Zweli Mkhize and them can use. So for me, it basically just says to him that, you know, more of the same, sir. But I think for me, it's going to present a bit of a headache, right? Because, I mean, you've mentioned this thing. He, for the whole of 2022, was basically talking about implementing the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. Now, how many of those officials are implicated there? You've got Nomvula, you've got Gwede Mantashe implicated in that, you know. And I mean, I suppose one can't help but also venture into a bit about Fikile Mbalula there. You know, he's the Minister of Transport. We've got a Transnet that is imploding, where he ought to have a say. I know it doesn't report to his department, but he's supposed to have a say there. You know, you've got many issues around public transport in South Africa. And I mean, let's leave the trains and all of that. The state of public transport just in general in South Africa.
I want to come back to the implications for the state, but I want us to, even though the ANC doesn't do so, separate party and state. Yeah. This top 7 for me, Sam, can't even resuscitate the ANC at an organizational level. And what I mean by that is getting back to a point where really important provinces like the Western Cape stand a chance of being in a position to challenge the DA come 2024. We know how hasty the process was of making sure that each of the individual branches meet the threshold requirements for a legitimate branch meeting so that they are able to feed into the overall process of eventually getting a representative to come to Nasrec. They've got a cash crisis. We know how crucial 3 weeks before an election the ANC election machinery is. It's often its greatest strength. They do better at that than they do at the state. But without cash, Fikile and Mama Action can't be good organizationally and having wheelbarrows taking old goggles to go and vote. So my question to you is, having 2 deputy SGs and having Fikile in that key role, will that give them better odds, leave the state out of it, to get their in-house business in order?
Look, Fikile is an amazing character, magnetic, electrifying in his style. You just remember how the ANC was fighting COPE after 2007. Fikile did a very well. He's one of the guys who got Nelson Mandela. It was this almost similar to this wheelbarrow moment you're referring to, and they wheel him out. To go to a stadium, and so they reduced COPE's impact. So he did very well there. In following elections, I mean, they elbowed him out, and Mama Action was in charge of the 2011 local election with Gwede Mantashe, and the ANC struggled because they were threatened by Fikile Mbalula. So he's the best for the ANC, but the kind of politics that he represents, that's all gone. His reputation as well in social media, and his stint in transport, I mean, became Minister of Potholes. There are problems there, and the kind of intellectual heavy lifting that is required in the role and preparing for this election. But where the ANC loses elections is in the turnout, his ability to get strongholds to go vote, and there's millions of new voters coming on board. So it's good luck to them. I mean, the money issue. I feel for Dr. Gwen Ramaphosa. I mean, money tends to be dirty. She gets in there, had a talk in his first public address. She was talking about intellectualizing beautifully what needs to be done. Like, I really feel for you. You might have to have a curveball coming your way pretty soon. Because, I mean, money moves in a dirty way. The laws make it difficult. Now, the ANC wants to increase the threshold for the declaration of foreign money coming to South Africa to maybe 5 million rands. But that doesn't really help you. Because the money doesn't even get to Lutuli House. And there's a comrade who's got 2 wallets. And there's a party wallet and their own wallet. And their own wallet tends to be bigger.
Second last question on this organizational stuff, and then we'll shift thematically to the other things that I had outlined at the beginning. You referenced this already, Sabelo, that the generational element is important. We're already in that cohort where we are not yet old, no longer young. Anyone younger than us who grew up in a completely digital environment with a different set of values, they are politically engaged and literate in ways that are chalk and cheese compared to the headspace and the world of a Pravin Gordhan, a Fikile, a Nomvula. And I wonder whether this top 7 and what the final NEC composition is, although that might save them a little bit, who knows, whether they have the ability to answer Sam's challenge appropriately, which is to say, strategically and tactically knowing how to fire your existing base up so that there is a high turnout in 2024 and potentially going to new constituencies. You can't take for granted that even a 25-year-old black kid whose parents vote ANC is a shoe-in to vote ANC.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for me, it's quite interesting, right? Because that's a part of what I was looking at in the run-up to this Congress and then also during the conference. And I mean, the sum total of these guys and the use of technology is when they, design these posters. The Slade posters,
Yes.
That's the sum total of their engagement with tech at the moment. I mean,
and they feel very cool.
Yeah, you can talk to
especially
anyone.
when you see on WhatsApp forwarded multiple times. Then they think they've hit the digital KPI.
And I mean, and I hate to do this, but I mean, you've got to compare it, for instance, to the Barack Obama campaign, for instance, if you wanted to. There was a use of technology there, but it was all like, social media adverts, very short, very emotive, right? And if
That's true.
you were to think about it, if anyone in South Africa has the currency for that, it would be the ANC.
Sure.
Right? They can proverbially wheel out, Madiba 100 times if they wanted to.
And some of them have got low barriers to entry, like
Yeah.
Sam's Twitter spaces that go viral.
Yeah. So I mean, but I mean, they can't even manage that.
Yes.
And I don't see that cohort of leadership being at the forefront of doing something like that. I mean, Fikile Mbalula, I think, is quite au fait with social media, Twitter, but I think he uses it for a different sort of use than what it can actually do. He just likes to go out there and be controversial.
Yeah.
But it's controversy without any actual mileage.
That's right.
For them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if you remember that scandal with Shaka Sisulu and them, when they doled out, I mean, that's the prime example for me. They doled out a lot of millions. But if you actually look at what the return was, all the return was just controversy, and they were getting sued left, right, and center by service providers who provided absolutely zilch, from actually making an impact digitally.
Absolutely. Let's end this conversation organizationally by just giving a couple of lowlights in terms of these guys' CV. Paul, a friend of mine, said yesterday, I hope she doesn't listen because I'm going to weaponize what she said in a way that I don't think she intended, but it will be useful for illustrative purposes. I've met the guy before, and he's quite a calm character. And I said, friend, that's exactly the problem. This guy's been around. Also, we're so used to shouty Fikile, shouty Kampi, that someone comes along, they look innocent, innocuous, friendly, and you forget to ask, what does even a Google desktop search tell me about their past? Paul is actually old, even though he looks young. He's been around. Who is he? And the same with Nomvula. We forget how she insulted our votes the other day and talked about picking up the rand. So the way we respond to just those two examples, Sam, and you can pick any others you want, Nomvula and Paul, we are reporting on their election as Slate Ramaphosa, as if those folks don't have CVs that need to be reinscribed into journalism.
Yeah, I mean, Paul is fascinating, a character. I mean, I don't know enough about him myself. The same way as you, Eusebius. He's so tempted just to get into the car and could drive to Alex. I mean, Alex is really 8 kilometers away, and figure out, where did this guy go to school?
Yeah.
What was he like? Did he play soccer? Is he an honest guy? What's his background, really? We know his history in government, in the Gauteng government, and is also a minister of arts and culture.
Yeah.
But nothing stands out as a positive thing that he did, whether he was premier of Gauteng. But he got caught up.
He did eat at a restaurant. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that was when before in the 2000, he spent 270,000 rands on a lunch back then. Yeah. Now you add inflation, and 12 years later. So look, there's some smoke around him. Of allegations that have never been proven. But also his governance track record. I mean, he's been around for quite a while, and there isn't a particular thing that you could associate with him and say it's innovative, and he did this. And going to Nomvula, I mean, the Bosasa issues, the chicken that he was getting from terrible.
Don't forget the bribe packs, the premium whiskey, the brandy.
You see,
the parties,
the 40th birthday party near Bosasa Park. But that I find in two ways, Sabelo, really deeply problematic as a South African voter. Firstly, that someone like that can make it to the top 7 of the incumbent governing party. But simultaneously, that the delegates put her there. She didn't elect herself, which means that the entire party's edifice is rotten to the core, and there's a nexus between dirty money, possibly stuffed into, who knows, Gucci bags or whatever the go-to company is these days, how she gets elected. And this is conjecture on my part. I'm not saying this is how it happened. But I'm both flabbergasted that being implicated in state capture, she's in the top 7. And the fans of Ramaphosa, including some commentators, don't mention that because they love him so much. They smooth over her background. But also, what the hell does it say about the delegates that voted for?
Well, I mean, it's the ANC, Eusebius. I think when Sam was sort of finishing off there, I just wanted to sort of say, but I mean, everything she did there is typical ANC. You know, someone would be able to sit you down and rationalize to you that this person was working for the good of the organization. And that's always something that she'll always be able to say when she's sitting in a meeting with comrades is that, but comrades, these things were being wheeled out in December, and these things I did to strengthen the constituency around me. Yes. And some of the money that flowed out of, you know, deals that I was involved in was money that went you know, to the governing party and to people linked to it. You know, so...
And at least, and this is a bad at least, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the party benefited. But it's not even clear how the party benefited.
It's not. Right? I mean, it's these things were hosted at a house.
Yes.
You know, sometimes they would find a stadium or whatever. But I mean, a lot of it probably, a lot of the benefit was more to her and her image in the party more than actually benefiting the ANC.
And Sabelo, isn't that also quite apart from her? And remind me, you've got more memory on detail than I do. Mediocrity inside government itself. I mean, what did she deliver on her portfolios?
Look, I mean,
didn't she also have scandals, her own sort of Ben 10 cloud around her and all that shenanigans?
Yes, Department of Water. I was going to that department, but I was going to go for the one that is hitting us now. You know, the crucial one. They signed this deal, you know, that was very sort of unclear with the Cubans around bringing engineers to South Africa to fix our water problems. But here we sit years later, our water loss is actually now in the region of about 70 to 80%. You know, it's worse than it was. Wow. I might actually, you know what, I might actually be wrong about that figure. Let me not put it down as concrete, but it's actually gotten exponentially worse. I just didn't do my research around it, you know, and you can see it. I mean, in KZN, part of the big problem with rebuilding after everything has happened now is that you've got non-existent water infrastructure. And a lot of it for me goes to that era, you know, in the Department of Water.
We could do the same. We'll just take one more example of the others who are in the top 7. Presumably, your ticket onto the top 7 should be to say, the last party resolutions is that we were supposed to do the following in the state for the people. This is what I've done. Please give me another senior position, maybe even a young promotion. Now, if you take someone like Gwede has a negative word cloud association next to energy and security and the mining sector, parts of the political economy that you report on. And then, lo and behold, the man is back in the driving seat, and you ask yourself, if you were utterly unemotional, a machine doing just marking next to KPAs, on what basis is this person selling a narrative that I did so well in the last 5 years next to what you asked me to do, that you have no choice but to re-elect me?
Funny. You should take it down to KPAs. You know, when Bantasha's KPAs include the energy availability factor, the amount of energy we're getting onto the grid, and it's actually been pointing down in the past 3 years. Now, that's a slam dunk conversation, but I mean, the ANC finds him very useful now. He was dead 6 weeks ago, and then the near resignation gave him energy again, and he's the one guy.
Pardon the pun.
Intended that. Yeah, so I mean, he's back quite strongly, and got a 2.0. That's what we're gonna get, and there's noise at the conference that Eskom must fall under his department. Wow. I don't know what that solves. DPE doesn't have enough people. It doesn't have an engineer and in the energy department who's senior enough to do anything about it. So moving into Gwede Mantashe's department doesn't help. It doesn't have the capacity.
No.
It's a trillion rand asset, and the DMRE, DPE, same thing.
So my producer Paige yesterday asked me for sort of 2-3 minute summary of what I thought as my immediate response to the top 7. And I want to just reiterate what I had said in essence, and that will be my closing remarks, and then yours, Sam, and then Sabelo. Because the overall question for our readers and listeners to this podcast is, okay, how should we feel about this ANC given the top 7? Obviously, the same question will be posed more completely once we have a composition of the NEC. And my take is, don't believe the hype, including from some of my colleagues in Arena. We are a company that is comfortable with agreeing and disagreeing. Our columnists see it differently, and that's par for the course. And, kudos to the owners of the company. My own view is that the president is still mediocre. The president still has ethical questions to answer. He's still going to be indecisive. He still has some of Jacob Zuma's keepers inside his cabinet in key positions around the world geopolitically as ambassadors. And none of the structural issues in the economy are going to be dealt with. And this idea, which Zizi Kodwa punted last night, that he's now free in a second term without the burden of needing a third term to do what he needs to do. We've seen that movie play out in the USA all the time. The myth that a second term presidency gives you the freedom to be decisive. So I think we're going to remain sluggish. And the idea that this is sort of a Ramaphosa comeback is at best a desperate psychological need for good news, but I think it's naive. Sam, is that too negative? How do you see it on balance?
Look, it could have been worse. Could have ended with the Tina Jomad Peterson for the Ramaphosa camp.
What do you have against coloured people?
They wanted Tina as the token coloured representative on the top 7, and then that didn't work. That's one thing that could have gone wrong for the Ramaphosa camp. It still went wrong. They don't have non-racialism in this new top 7. It could have been Zweli Mkhize and a bunch of dodgy people at the same time. We didn't get that. But okay, fine. On its own, the top 7, I'm negative about it. Yeah. I completely agree with you about this mythical expectation that Ramaphosa will all of a sudden become a more decisive president. Yeah, look, he's a nice guy. Terrible politician, very weak. Can't take a decision. He doesn't have drive. He doesn't have hunger. He doesn't want to do the job. He's really.
And being a nice guy is not good enough, right? Because the one thing about the ANC politicians, sorry to interrupt here, because it's this thing I love saying to people who often ask me, aren't you scared of politicians? How do you guys interact with them, like when you bump into each other? Most ANC politicians, and I only say most to not catch myself afterwards if there's an exception, are really nice people. But that's never been a necessary or sufficient requirement for good governance.
For leadership,
No, I mean,
they're nicer people than the DA.
We had ESCOM without a chair for too long. Yeah. More than 2 years. That board was just wasn't strengthened because Ramaphosa is a nice guy who doesn't do his job.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm negative about it. He's now beholden to Gwena Mantashe, to all the people around him. Paul Mashatile, who came from a different kind of politics to him. They've turned him around. He's a hostage to the ANC and his dirty, terrible, dysfunctional politics.
Sabelo, you're going to have the last word. For the sake of our readers, please tell Sam and I that we are wrong.
Yeah, look, as you were speaking, I was sitting there and I'm thinking like silver lining.
Tina could have been.
Look, for me.
Musa tried last week in Sunday Times and I thought, shame, man. Stem Biso at least tried to give space to this guy who was like, in other countries you would not see such vigorous debate about the president on S89. I almost called him up and I said, I love you to bits. Thanks for being there with the constitutional design in the 90s.
Yeah.
But if you set your sights low enough, you will never be disappointed. Don't write a whole Sunday Times article saying, isn't it beautiful to live in a country where you have freedom of speech?
What would have been in Turkey, right?
How?
That's the standard.
Underground. The bars underground.
Funny enough, he had the Iran example in mind, where you can be executed.
That's the standard.
Yeah.
Look,
Did you find a silver lining?
Somewhat, right?
Okay.
And please, guys, go with me here till I get to the end. Suffer with me. So one of the things that for me was quite worrying about this Zweli Mkhize campaign And it took me back to the Eastern Cape Elective Conference, where the regional secretary of Amatole was addressing delegates, Teres Ntutu. He probably, in the 2 weeks prior to that, had just gotten off a corruption case that was at the High Court Mthatha. And I mean, it was dismissed. I think the NPA, it was actually dismissed by the court. So he then says, part of the problem that they have with the current administration is that they are not protecting them. You know, it's an ANC that is subjecting leaders and comrades to DCs. They are suspending them. And it was a real gripe. And the more I looked around, even in other provinces, a lot of people were saying this, and I think these are the people that were sort of coalescing around Zweli Mkhize. And Zweli Mkhize, being the one who's implicated in that SIU report around digital vibes, was obviously running with this. So the fear that we had was that you're going to have a leadership that is going to, on its first day, probably take a lot of decisive action about further destroying, our law enforcement agencies and our capability. So for me, the fact that when those moves were being tried in conference by people who were obviously seeing that if Ramaphosa returns, there's a chance that we might be charged and all of that. They were trying to sell this to the delegates, and they were saying, let's take N3, and for whatever reason, the delegates held strong on that one. Yeah. For me, and I mean, I'm not going to go out and say that this is now an indication of some sort of renewal or whatever. I think that if we were to have a Cyril who then decided that I'm going to shock the whole world and I'm just going to go and not be half measured about this entire thing. This is the time for him to do it. Sure. He's got nothing to lose. And if he thinks that like Zizi Kodwa says, this is going to be smooth sailing, there's a lot of things that I think are potentially going to come around and burn him in the last 18 months of his administration, because again, we'll be in conference mode.
Yes.
We still have...
You won't get there.
We still have a question about SAA.
You think?
And I think that the South African Airways situation, for instance, might be the albatross that ultimately drags him down towards the end of his administration.
Are you there? 18 months is not that long.
Before the end of his administration?
Yeah.
No, I mean, that means he'll have to spend 3 years at least. They will recall him. They will recall him.
I think Sabelo, there was a valiant effort. Pule Page basically resigned on national TV last night, so there's a job vacancy there. I don't know if you secretly a branch member, but you're right. I mean, there is a lot. I used to have a boring speech as a keynote speaker saying these are the problems with the country, and then like a good undergraduate from Rhodes, I would trot out the theoretical designs of our system that are cool. But the more I'm in journalism, the more I'm forced to pay attention to realpolitik and pragmatism. Yep. And you can't keep holding on to the theoretical design.
Sure.
And I think that's where the challenge is for us. Guys, I love your brains. I love your journalism. I loved your piece 3 days ago, Sam, although you should be careful because we all have imikaba. He was accusing the ANC of having a bunch of old people with pot bellies and cheese cobs looking like Madiba's ANC from the 80s. Newsrooms look the same. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you, man. It's fun.